Okay, guys. So we were having a look at the TestNG framework, which is a testing framework. Okay, where we can perform different kind of testing using the TestNG framework, and this framework comprises of several annotations, and we have seen these many annotations so far. Okay, 12 almost. Sorry. 11 annotations that we have discussed so far. So let me zoom this in so that you can view it clearly. Perfect. Okay, so these are the different annotations that we have seen before. Those are at the rate test, at the rate before test, at the rate after test, at the rate before method, after method, before class, after class, before suit, after suit, and at the rate data provider, but we haven't talked much about this one. At the rate parameters, we have seen that how we can pass parameters to the test methods using at the rate parameters, and these annotations are pending to discuss. Okay, so altogether, listeners, factory, before group, after group, and data provider, these are the annotations that we need to discuss. So in the previous session we were discussing about the different attributes which need to be provided for the at the rate test annotation. Okay, so at the rate test annotation takes different parameters. Okay, and we were discussing about those parameters, sorry, typo, of at the rate test annotation. Okay, what are the different parameters of the at the rate test annotation? Can you please tell me?
Priority,
Priority,
enabled,
enabled,
groups,
perfect. Sorry,
groups,
groups, yeah.
um,
Then
Always
we
run.
have talked about the dependency.
Always run.
Always run, yes. What always run does?
Depends on group.
What always run will do? What is the
always
use
run
of?
the test script.
Sorry,
It will always run the test script.
Either it's pass or fail.
it is always run the test script. That is right, but in what situations?
Either the test case is pass or fail.
Uh, See, there are three phases. We need to understand this very clearly. Execution of all test cases will happen for sure. Okay, unless and until they are marked as enabled equal to false. Okay,
Okay.
and all test cases have three phases. That is pass, phase, fail, and script. Right?
Yes.
Pass, fail, and script. So every test case will run obviously unless and until enabled is equals to false. Okay, one more annotation we have to discuss over here. Okay, so unless and until the parameter enabled equal to false is marked, till that point all test cases are going to be executed. Okay, but what always run says is, always run will say that my test method should be executed regardless of anything. Okay, regardless of anything, and for every build it should be executed. Okay, so how we can achieve the soft dependency using the always run? This was the parameter that we haven't discussed in the previous session. So if you mark any test case as always run equal to true, then this test case will run for sure regardless of any situation which encounters while execution of the entire test suite. Okay, so test method with this parameter set to true will run for sure regardless of anything. So even if you try to write a depends on group or depends on methods. Okay, so what are the another parameters that we have seen? Depends
Depends on
on
group.
groups, right? We have seen
Depends
this.
on method.
Depends
Yes.
on methods, we have seen, right? Then
Groups.
groups we have seen, right? Groups we have seen, perfect. Then what else?
DataProvider.
That is the one we supposed to cover. Okay, DataProvider. This is the parameter that we haven't seen yet. Okay, so these are the different parameters, and there are so many again. Okay, so let me list them out quickly. One more annotation we have is invocation count. Okay, invocation count, and then we have is
Invocation timeout.
yeah, invocation timeout, and then we have
Expected exception.
yes, expected exception. Okay, and then we have
Timeouts. Timeout.
timeouts is also there. Timeouts, and
Thread pool size.
thread pool size is there.
Single thread.
Sorry,
Single
single
thread.
single threaded. It's single threaded. Yeah, single threaded is there.
Success per
And
percentage.
yeah, expected percentage, right?
Success per percentage.
Success percentage, yes. Success percentage. So these are the different parameters.
Description.
Yes, description is also there, right? Thank you for reminding. Description is there.
Last is ignore.
Ignore is also there. Okay, so these many parameters we have inside @test @test annotation. Okay, so using this what we can say, these parameters, I guess ignore is not there, right? Using this attributes or parameters for the @test annotation, we can have a control of the execution of the test cases. Now, how we can have a control of the execution of the test cases? First, we have a priority. Okay, we have seen that if we set a priority of the test method, then the test methods will execute in the given priority only. Okay, then we have enabled, if we mark it as true, then obviously the test case will take part in the execution. If we mark it as a false, then test case will not take a part in execution. By using this parameter groups, we can specify that to which group this test case belongs. Okay, by marking this parameter as a true, we will force our method to execute for sure regardless of anything. Depends on groups, we can create a dependency of our test case on particular groups. Okay, means if any of the group is going to fail, okay, my test case will not execute. Okay, depends on methods. Here we are going to create a dependency on particular methods, so we can make a list of methods on which my test case is dependent upon. Okay, and if any of the methods mentioned in the list get failed, my test case will not execute. Okay, groups encounter double. Okay, perfect. Then data provider we have. Okay, so we are not going to talk about it right now. Then we have invocation count. Now, what is meant by invocation count? So this attribute or this parameter tells that my test case will be executed how many times. Okay, so let's say I have marked the invocation count as 5. So my test case will execute 5 times. Now, what is the need of this? Okay, so let us imagine a scenario that there is a test case of typing the OTP or maybe password. Okay, in case of banking applications, there is a case where if you enter wrong password more than 3 times, then your account should get blocked, right? So this is the scenario. So you need to test this scenario. How you are going to test the scenario? You are going to execute the test case which will enter wrong username and password 3 times. Okay, so for that a single method will be executed for 3 times. Okay, same method will be executed 3 times, and after executing it 3 times, then we are going to check whether our account is blocked or not. So we will execute the test case which will check whether account is blocked or not. So this is a simple scenario where we can use this parameter and we can execute our test case number of times. Okay, so how we can use this parameter? So let me show you people that how we can use this parameter. Okay, and at the test, let's say here I'm going to mention invocation count is equals to maybe 3. Okay, invocation count. So let me zoom this in so that you can see the code that I'm writing. Okay, perfect. Now let's try to print something over here. A simple sysout statement I'll write. Okay, and here I'm going to put some hello testing Shastra. Okay, that's it. And let's execute this. And let's observe that how many times hello testing Shastra gets printed. So I'm just executing this class only. Okay. Yes, can you see over here in the result, we can see 3 times hello testing Shastra is printed. Okay. So what this means, by providing the invocation count to 3, our test case is executed for 3 times. Okay. So this is how you can execute your test cases multiple times. So I'm not going to write a description for it. Now invocation timeout. Now what is this invocation timeout means? Let's say that how much time it will take to invoke your method. So that is the timeout value. So this timeout value should be provided in milliseconds only. Okay, invocation timeout is equals to, let's say, 1000 milliseconds is what I'm giving. So invocation timeout of this method will be a 1 second. Okay, 1000 milliseconds means 1 second. Can you see the method is executed only once because invocation count was not specified and the timeout is 1000 seconds. Let's say before this time, let's say if method is taking more time to invoke, in that case, more than 1 second, obviously, in that case, this method will not get executed and it will be skipped for that amount of time. Let's say, let me see that this is 10 milliseconds. Yeah, it is taking very less time, so it is executing in that duration also. Okay, perfect. Invocation timeout. Then expected exception. Now you can mention what kind of exception this method can throw. Okay, so that is the very good advantage given by the TestNG to you, where you can mention expected exception. How you can write expected exceptions is equals to what kind of exceptions your method may throw. Okay, sorry, that is what we are telling over here. Let's say for the example, for the sake of example, I'm writing arithmetic exception over here, and let me mention that my method expects arithmetic exception dot class. Perfect. Now let's execute this method. Yeah, can you see hello testing Shastra is printed, but it was expecting the exception, that is why it has been handled. But if I change it to IO exception, so let me import this. Perfect. Now let's execute it. Can you see on the console we can see the exception? Okay, so by default TestNG on your behalf handles the exception if it is provided. Okay, so what is the scene over here? Expected exception of the type class IO exception but got arithmetic exception. So in that case, it will throw the exception to JVM. But if you want to handle the exceptions in the TestNG, then obviously you are not supposed to write try and catch blocks. So that is the very good advantage given by the TestNG to you, where it gives you the chance to handle the exception at the method level itself. So it says that arithmetic exception may encounter, but obviously this is not going to handle the exception. This is just going to intimate about the exception, and your normal flow of execution will remain same. Okay, so let's write some more method over here. M1, for example. Okay, at the rate test. That's it. And let's make it as IO exception. Perfect. Yes, so let's execute this one more time. Yeah, test run 1 failed positive test case because of the exception. Okay, but if we mark it here as an arithmetic exception, and let's give some statement over here. Perfect. Let's execute this. Yes, can you see over here M1 and positive test case both are passed over here? Okay, because why it is passing? Because the exception is handled at the method level itself. Okay, so we are intimating to the TestNG that my method may throw arithmetic exception, so please handle it at your end. So handling code is not given obviously, but this is not an exception handling thoroughly, but this is about intimating the exceptions, and if they encounter, I am asking TestNG to please mark my test case as a pass even if the exception encounters. Okay, even if the exception encounters, that is not a very big deal for me, and I want to mark my test case as a fail in that case also. This is what I'm telling to my TestNG. Okay, so TestNG will read this request and it will ignore arithmetic exception wherever it encounter, and it will make your test case as a pass regardless of the exception. Okay, so here you can mention multiple exceptions. Here you can mention multiple exceptions, and how you need to provide them like this. Okay, so here we can provide a list of exceptions that my test case may encounter with, or my test case may throw these many exceptions. So after specifying those exceptions over here at the method level, TestNG will ignore those exceptions and mark our test case as a pass. But if the exceptions are not ignored, then test cases will remain false, will remain fail. Okay, they appear as a fail in the result. So this is what is going to happen if you are not ignoring the exceptions. Okay, so this is very cool feature that TestNG is giving to us. Okay, because most of the time when you are writing the test cases, there are chances of having the exceptions, and obviously those exceptions doesn't matter for you as much. Okay, in that situations you need to specify, or you need to ignore those exceptions. So this is how you can mark expected exceptions over here. Then we have timeouts. Then obviously a timeouts means how much time this method should take to execute. This is the timeouts. Now thread pool size. What thread pool size means? How many threads our method can invoke at the same time. Okay, that is what is the thread pool size we need to mention. So where we are not mentioning the invocation count, okay, at that point you cannot mention this thread pool size. But when you are mentioning invocation count more than one, obviously, so you are going to tell the TestNG that this method should be executed 3 times and 3 different threads will execute this method. So obviously this is going to speed up the execution process. Okay, because imagine you have, let's say you have one method over here and you need to execute it 3 times. Now only one man is there, only one guy is there who is executing this method. Okay, and let's say to execute this method one time it takes 1 second. So how much time it will take to execute it 3 seconds for 3 times? Okay, obviously 3 seconds. One guy is executing it for one time, takes 1 second. So the same guy will take 3 seconds to execute it 3 times. Okay, so obviously the execution time is increasing over here because of the invocation count. Getting it? Invocation count. But let's say if I'm giving the thread pool size as 3, now instead of having one guy, I have 3 guys over here who are responsible to execute my method 3 times. So one will execute this method one time, another thread will execute it one more time, and another thread will execute it one time. Okay, so total time taken will be 1 second only. Why? Because every thread is taking 1 second to execute the test case. Okay, and all 3 threads are executing the test case, the same test case simultaneously. So 3 people simultaneously working on your method, your test method. So obviously the time of execution will be reduced over here. So time of execution will be 1 second, but in this case it is 3 seconds. So that is a thread pool size. So wherever you feel that you need to use a multi-threading kind of concept in your TestNG, obviously you are good to go with this thread pool size. Okay, then single threaded means you are marking your test case to be a single threaded, only one thread can access it and execute it. Success percentage. So what is success percentage? Here you can mention the percentage of success that you are expecting from your test case. Let's say my test case, if it is okay for you to execute your test case for, let's say 50%, okay, its success is 50%. If it is okay for you, then obviously you can mention that success percentage over here, and for that success percentage your test case will be marked as a pass. Okay, not a fail, because in other situations what happen is your test case should be 100% successfully executed. Okay, 100% it should be executed successfully. Okay, that is the criteria. But if you want that my test case may run 60% and that is okay for me, then obviously you can mark that success percentage over there, and that 60% TestNG will consider as a pass. Okay, it will not expect the method to be executed 100% successfully. Okay, then description. What is the description? Is description of the test case that you are writing. Okay, it is really good idea to write the description of each and every test case that you are writing, because each and every description may occur in your reports, where you will can have a look at the report and can read the description, and you will easily understand that why we have written this test case and what is the purpose of this test case and what this test case is doing actually. So this kind of description you can mention over here in terms of string only. Okay, in double quotes, write down the proper description over here in front of this attribute of the @test annotation. So these are the different annotations. Now what we need to discuss is data provider. This is the annotation that we need to discuss in today's session. Okay guys, so hold your breath, and this is very good topic and very interesting, my favorite one. Okay, so let us have a discussion about it. Data provider. Data provider. Okay, data provider. Now see, as its name suggests, data provider means something which is going to provide data to the test case. So it will provide data to the test case. Okay, so mainly data provider is a very good option when you want to perform a data-driven testing. Okay, so in case of data-driven testing, it is a very good option to use the data provider. Now, what is it actually? So it is a simple thing, which it is something, okay? We are not going to talk technically about it first. So we will talk generally. It will provide data to the test case. Now, we may have huge amount of data, okay? And we need to test that data against a single test case. Okay, most of the time this happens in the data-driven testing, where we have a large set of data and we want to test each and every pair of the data with some particular functionality. Let's say we have a login functionality for which we have 1,000 username and 1,000 passwords, okay, and they are all valid, they are present in the database. Now my task is to test whether my application is recognizing all those 1,000 database 1,000 username password pairs or not. Okay, so this is kind of data driven approach we are supposed to follow in our testing process. Okay, for that, if you are going to do it manually, then obviously it is a very cumbersome task to perform. But if you take a help of data provider, it is a matter of milliseconds only. Okay, so in very less time, in very few minutes, very few time, not minutes, in very few time, data provider will provide the entire set of data to your test case one by one. Okay, and for each and every pair of data, it will execute the test case and it will mark the test case in the report for each and every data and the behavior of the test case for each and every data pair. Okay, now let's see how it works. So data provider is an annotation which can be applied to the method, as well as it has parameter for @test annotation. Okay, it is a annotation as well as a parameter for @test annotation. Okay, now if we apply @data provider annotation to any method, it is method level annotation again. Okay, method level annotation. If we apply @data provider annotation to any method, in that case, that method will act as a provider of the data. Okay, as a provider of the data. Now let's see how we can create the data provider. So let me call this method as login data. Okay, login data, and this is a public method again. Okay, now what are the rules to create a data provider? What are the rules to create the data provider? First rule is we need to mark this method with the annotation data provider. That's it. Second thing, we should give a name, a very good name, very informative name to this method. Okay, because this method is a data provider and we should give a very good name to this, and obviously a matching one, an informative one. So we will call this as login data provider. That's it, login data provider. Now observe here, data provider and test cases are in a same class. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is a data provider should always return object array. Okay, it can be a one-dimensional array, it can be a two-dimensional array. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm taking a two-dimensional array over here. So the second rule becomes is, so let me write down the rules. First rule is @data provider annotation with name attribute. Okay, name attribute we need to give. So that is what we have given. The next thing is data provider method should return object array. Okay, single dimensional or multi-dimensional will work, no problem. Okay, that's it. So these are the two rules we have seen so far. Now we need to return object array. For that we need to create one first, object, and we will say values. Okay, and we are not going to give some size to this, and we will return these values over here. That's it. Sorry. Perfect. Let's initialize this. Okay, for the sake of example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take username and password pair. So I'll say user1 comma pass1, and then the second pair we are going to take. Okay, that is user2 comma pass2. Okay, and again comma, and user3 comma pass3, and let's close this up. Perfect. That's it. So this is the two-dimensional array that we have created. Okay, now these three pairs will be passed to the test case, which requires login data for 3 times. Okay, and the method which is invoking this data provider will be executed 3 times. Why? Because this array is having 3 entries, 1, 2, and 3. So let us see how we can use this data provider. So we have created the data provider. Okay, we have created the data provider. This should be a public one. Then it is time to use the data provider. How do we use the data provider? Simply, we need to write the parameter for this is data provider is equals to, now name of data provider we need to mention over here. What is the name of data provider? Login data provider. Okay, so name is compulsory for this reason. Okay, now we are telling the testing @test. Okay, we are telling the TestNG that our test case is seeking for the data provider in the same class with name login data provider. Okay, and this login data provider is going to return two-dimensional object array. So we need to take two values here as a parameter. Okay, perfect, and let's print them simply. So maybe uname plus /t plus pass. That's it. Okay, here we have made a spelling mistake. Perfect. That's it. So this test case will be executed 3 times. Why? Because our data provider is having 3 entries in it. User1, user2, user3. Okay, these are the 3 usernames and 3 different passwords that we have. So let's try to execute this code and let's see what happens. So let me comment this method. Perfect. Okay, now only one test case we have in our class and one data provider is there. So let's execute this. That's it. Can you see over here? The test case is executed 3 times. Can you see over here? Test run 3 times, failure 0, skips 0. Okay. So here what we are going to do is we are going to test large amount of data by providing them one by one to our test case. Okay, so this is how we can provide large amount of data to our test case, and we can validate that which pair of data is correct and which pair of data is not correct. Okay, so let's say we are taking a decision over here. If uname dot contains what? User. Okay. And pass dot contains pass. If these characters are present in the username and password, then we will say that it is valid. Okay, so what we are going to say is this is valid. Okay, this is valid. So we are going to print them. But if they doesn't contain user or pass kind of phrases in the username and password field, then what we are going to do is we are going to throw new some exception. Okay, so maybe arithmetic for the sake of simplicity. That's it. So we are forcefully failing our test case over here. Now let us try and check the method whether it executes perfectly or not. Okay, now it has user 4. Now it is a spell mess, or maybe Avinash 1 and password is Avinash 123. Now let's see that how our data provider and our test case behaves for this pair of data. So let's execute this. Yeah, can you see total test run are 4, failure is 1, skips are 0. Okay, now let's observe over here. What is it saying? Arithmetic exception have been encountered. And can you see the failed test cases? M1, Avinash 1, Avinash 1 to 3. So here we can throw the exception and we can mark this test case as a fail. So we can also create a customized exception for our project. Okay, so here for the sake of example, I have created the arithmetic exception. It is a Java's inbuilt exception. But here I can say my own exception, like username or password is incorrect exception. This is the exception I can create over here. So how we can create that exception? Okay, so let us try creating an exception. So where we have written it, the TestNG demo, I guess. Okay, what is the name of class? Sign up. So we don't have that class here. Let me close this. Okay. Sample form. In a sample form, we have this. Okay, perfect. Here in the test cases, maybe. And we have this class over here. Okay. So now let's try creating the exception of our project. So how we can do that? Click on this packages and write this package name as custom exceptions. Perfect. And in this, we are going to create a class custom exceptions. We have seen this topic in the exception handling. Now we are using it over here in our project. Okay. Perfect here. And what we need to do is we need to extend exception class over here. Exception. That's it. Done. We are done. Okay. Now here, now we can throw which exception? Maybe we will call this as invalid user or password exception. Okay, so let's change its name. Done. Now we can throw this exception from this method and let's import it. Okay, we are not going to surround this with a try catch block. Perfect. Now our test case will throw the customized exception. Yes, that's it. Can you see now? Invalid username or password exception. So this is how we can throw our own customized exceptions over here, and we can also customize the messages. Okay, now we have the exception class extended, so we can implement the methods of the exception class as per our requirement by using the overriding concept of the object-oriented programming. Okay, so this is how a data provider can provide large amount of data to the test case. Okay, but here what is happening, your test case and data provider are in the same class, but ideally this should not happen. Your data provider should be in a different class. Okay, you should follow the modular approach. For that purpose, what you need to do is you need to create, let's say inside keywords itself, I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call this class as data providers. Okay, data providers, this is the name of class. Now what I'll do is I'll copy this entire code from here, cut this entire code from here, and I'm going to paste this code over here. So let me zoom this in so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, perfect. Yes, now can you see what I have created is I have created a separate class named with data providers. Why I have given the name data providers name? Because data provider is already there. It is a keyword of the TestNG, so we should not mess up with the keywords which are already exist in the Java or maybe your third-party libraries. So this is the name that we have given for the data provider. Okay, now if we try to execute our test case, okay, let's see what happens with this test case. See what is it saying? Test run only one, failure only one. Okay, now what is the reason? Let us check. What is the reason? Can you see? Method public void test cases dot signup dot m1, okay, throws custom exceptions invalid. Okay, requires, can you see this? This is very important message over here. So let me zoom this in a bit. Requires a data provider named login data provider. Means TestNG is unable to find the data provider in the same class. So why this happened? Because in the @test annotation, we have mentioned the name of data provider only, but location we didn't have provided. So what is the required thing is we need to provide the location of data provider method. How we can provide the location of data provider method? For that we have one more parameter over here in the @test, and that is data provider class. Okay, what is the parameter? Data provider class. Now we need to give the name of class over here, and that is data providers dot class we need to give. That's it. So this is second parameter to mention the location of the data provider method. So let us add this in the list. So we have seen the data provider as well as the data provider class. Oh, okay, perfect. That's it, data provider class. Okay. Now let's execute this method once again, and let's see whether it invokes the data provider method or not. That's it. It is executing successfully. Can you see? Okay. Test run 4, failure 1. Okay. Now, if you want to look at the detailed report generated by the TestNG, then how we can look at it? is simply right click on the project, click on refresh. So test output folder will appear. Inside this test output folder, we can find the emailable report over here. Emailable report. We can open it with the we'll say other. It's taking a lot of time, so we will let's cancel this. So here is the report that we have, and can you see M1 test case is failed one time, okay, and test cases M1, M1, M1 are executed 3 times, where it shows the entire history of the execution for parameter 1, parameter 2, Avinash 1 and Avinash 1 to 3. There is an exception called as invalid user exception for parameter 1, parameter 2, okay, user 1 and pass 1, the test case is passed. For parameter user 2, pass 2, the test case is passed. For parameter user 3 and pass 3, the test case is passed. Okay, so it is showing all of the results to us. So if we click on this, obviously we are going to jump on the results from here. So how much time it took? It is 17 milliseconds. Okay, and this method took 2 milliseconds to execute. Okay, that is very less time actually. Okay, perfect. So this is how we can use the data provider from a different class. Okay, and it is recommended to not include your test cases and data provider in a same class. It is recommended to maintain all the data providers in a different class, because in coming future we may have a requirement to test the sign up data. So in that case we need to create some different method, and that is sign up data. Okay, sign up data. Then again we will mark this method as public, and we should give the data provider annotation over here, data provider, and we need to give a unique name to this, and name to this is sign up data provider. Okay, this is the name of this data provider. Then again we can create some code over here. Okay, then again we can write some more data providers. Okay, let's say customer data. So we can create as many data providers as we want here in the same class. So it is really easy to maintain all of your data providers from same file. Okay, data provider name is equals to customer data provider. So these are the sample data providers that we have created. Now you can use your data providers wherever you want, or for whatever test cases you want. So it is not compulsory to use one data provider for the one test case. We can use one data provider for n number of methods. Okay, we can use one data provider for n number of methods, because it is a provider. Okay, it is a data provider and it can be used with any of the methods. So this is how you can maintain your data providers in different classes and use them with the test cases. Okay, so classes with having the test cases. So this is the simple data structure of the data provider, okay. Now one thing we need to notice over here is our data mostly comes from the different files. Okay, so mostly in our project data is so let me write down the rule. Data provider methods should be written and maintained in separate class. Okay, data provider methods should be written and maintained in separate class. Okay, next, data or maybe test data may come from different files. Okay, so source of test data can be anything. Okay, so test data can come from different files. So what kind of files we may have? We may have CSV files, we may have Excel files, we may have database itself. Okay, or we may have properties file, or any kind of file we may have. Okay, so comma separated files, or maybe Excel files, or maybe database, or maybe properties file. So source of test data can be anything. Now what is our requirement is we need to write a data provider method in such a way that it should accept test data from different files. So accept sign up data from maybe Excel sheet. Okay, so we need to write down a code over here to get the data from Excel sheet and dump the data in an object array. Okay, we need to dump the data inside object array, and we need to return this object array from this method itself. So this is how we can use the data provider as well as the Excel sheet, and we can bind them together to provide test data from Excel sheet to your test cases. Okay, so this is the exercise that we are going to see in the coming session. So we will take data from Excel sheet and we will provide that data from Excel sheet to the test case. So do you guys have any questions in this session?